Now for today's program. We first want to thank HiFlix, the exclusive streaming curator of Jewish and Israeli content, for making today's program possible and for giving everyone registered for this Zoominar access to the first 3 episodes of Asylum City. In case you have not yet watched the series, Asylum City, which was nominated for 6 Israeli Academy Awards, is set in the underworld of refugees and asylum seekers in Tel Aviv. The series follows a young police officer who is investigating a murder. While trying to find the assassin, a complex web of political corruption, organized crime, and exploitation is exposed. Asylum City stars Israeli-American actress Hani Furstenberg as the young police officer, Anat. Raised in New York, Hani moved to Israel at age 15, where she quickly became one of Israel's best-known young actresses. She first gained attention for her role on the popular Israeli television series The Bourgeoisie, for which she also recorded 2 hit songs. Hani starred in the Israeli films Yossi and Jagger, as well as Campfire, which won her the Israeli Oscar. She was also the female lead in the international film The Loneliest Planet. Hani has starred in such shows as Hamlet, Amadeus, and Fiddler on the Roof at Israel's prestigious Camry Theater. And she received an Israeli Tony Award in 2010 for her portrayal of a ventriloquist puppeteer dummy in Ghetto. Hani has also appeared both off and on Broadway, including the role of Frau Kost in Cabaret. Hani had a reoccurring role in American Gods on Stars and will next be in the miniseries Angeline and the upcoming limited series The Green Veil, which she filmed during the pandemic. Liad Shoham is Israel's leading and most successful crime writer. He is also an attorney and continues to practice law while publishing novels yearly. His thrillers have all been critically acclaimed #1 bestsellers and are realistic depictions of Israel's criminal justice system. Liad's books have been translated into 7 languages and are sold in more than 20 countries around the globe. His books Lineup and Asylum City were both published in English. Liad is the creator of the 12-episode mystery drama Asylum City, based on the book of the same name. The TV series first aired in 2018 and was an immediate hit. The series was nominated for Best Drama in the annual Israeli TV Awards. Liad is also the creator of a 40-episode series named The Cop's Daughter, which was nominated for Best Drama for Young Adults. Joining Hani and Liad today is Moment editor Sarah Breger. She is also the director of Moment's Daniel Pearl Investigative Initiative. Sarah has won numerous awards, including first place for Religion Reporting of the Year from the Religion News Association, and first place for the best in-depth news writing on religion from the American Academy of Religion. Please welcome Hani Furstenberg, Liad Shoham, and Sarah Breger.
Thank you, Suzanne, and thank you so much for putting this program together. And thank you to Liad and Hani for being here.
Thanks for having us.
I'm sure, I'm sure not everyone had a chance to maybe watch all 3 episodes before this talk, but if you have a chance, I really recommend it. I ended up watching the whole series, all 10 episodes over the course of 2 days, and
12 episodes.
12 episodes. Oh my gosh! I think I'm just embarrassed that I watched so much TV over the course of 2 days. But I was recovering from my booster shot, so I guess it's okay. But it was really, I think it was a really great portrayal of, a certain aspect of a city from all different angles. A little bit reminiscent of The Wire, which I think I've seen some of the creators talking about how they had that in mind when they were creating it. Liad, I wanted to ask you first off, you've written so many different thrillers. What made you decide to set this one in the African refugee community in South Tel Aviv?
Well, in all the books that I've written, what I try to do is to use the genre of the crime novel and the thrillers into discussing issues that are occupying the public opinion in Israel. I wrote a book about settlers. I wrote a book about the Supreme Court, about municipalities, about retrials, and one of the books that I've written is Asylum City. It all started when I watched news, and it was written in 2013, sorry. And I heard about the the flock of African immigrants into Israel and the hysteria that it creates. And I was intrigued by it. So I decided what I do in every book that I write, I do a little bit of investigation prior to writing the book. So I called the head of the police office in the central station of Tel Aviv, and I told him, listen, I want to meet and discuss this phenomena. And I took a cab from my office in the central part of Tel Aviv. I drove 5 or 10 minutes, and I encountered a different kind of reality. Not only the color of the people changed, but the music, the smell. It was like, you know, going abroad. And when I met this police officer, we were standing in the Levinsky Garden, which is a garden inside of the Tel Aviv Central Station, and there were people lying on the ground, and buses came, and he told me, listen, these guys crossed the border today from Egypt to Israel. They got a bus ticket, and here they are in Tel Aviv. And what triggered the crime thinking about it, he told me, if there's a crime here, and we do not catch a perpetrator in the next 5 minutes, we're going to lose it, because we do not know anything about these people. No names, no family ties. They change addresses, they change work, and so if we do not catch them, they will disappear. And the starting point of the book was, and also the TV series, was that a murder that took place in the northern part of Tel Aviv. A young woman was murdered, and the police investigator, portrayed by Hani, when she comes to the scene, the only thing that the neighbor can tell her is he saw a black man running out of the apartment. And in order to solve the crime, she has to understand the social reality. She has to figure out what is going on in this section that the Israeli police does not know anything about. So investigating the crime is also investigating the social arena. And this is something I try to do in all of my books, and I did it here. I think that I gave a very long speech. I'm sorry.
No, that was great. I think it also, it also gave a primer for the book itself. And actually my question to Hani about what drew you to Anat, who is such a complex, interesting character.
It's interesting because I actually, Eitan, the director, I started my career with him in the Bourgeoisie when I was 20, which was some years ago. And he asked me to come in and read for Michal, the woman who gets murdered. And I was cast as Michal. And then I was living in New York, and they were looking for the actress to play Anat. And one day I got a phone call from Eitan saying, you know, what do you think? This is like the opposite of what we've been looking for. But what do you think about playing this character? And Anat is very, very far from any character that I've ever played or seen myself playing. So I said to him, I don't know, it scares me, which makes me want to do it, but let's put me on tape and see what it feels like for me and see what it feels like for you, and take it from there. And so that's what we did. And it felt surprisingly, I felt surprisingly at home with it. I think that, I mean, Anat she, like Michal, she strives for justice. These are the things that I I feel attached to, I feel connected to. She wants justice to prevail. She doesn't want the politics to overtake anything inside of the police station as well. She gets emotionally attached to the story and finding the perpetrators. Yeah, and she's just this really strong character with many layers that I think any actress would want to dive into it. And I was lucky enough to have the opportunity.
I think, by the way, that Anat is also a very intelligent cop, policewoman. And she comes from a background. She studied law, and she found herself in the police. And she's a kind of character that is one of the smartest people in the room, but doesn't show it. And when I saw the acting of Hani, the looks that Hani gives, and you can see when you look at her that she's thinking, she doesn't say all the things that she's thinking right now. So it was a perfect match from my point of view.
Thank you. I do like things that are understated. Yeah, I'm drawn to those things as well. And it's true, I forgot, you know, I haven't seen the show in so long. I really have to revisit it to remind myself of all of these, of the character and of all of the little, yeah.
It was interesting that Anat was kind of given a backstory in the show that she didn't really have in the books, in terms of her father being in prison. And
in prison, yes.
Kind of being a criminal mastermind. Liad, how did it work to translate, you know, your words to screen? And how did you decide, you know, what to keep and what to change?
Well, it was, the book is rather similar to the TV series, but there were some of the things were changed in order to adapt. This is a different kind of language, writing books and writing scripts, and this was the first experience for me for and this was the first book that I wrote that was adapted to TV. Later on, other books were adopted. But so for me, it was a unique experience to see the movement of the language between the book and how do you, in books, you hear the character things and you know what. For example, Anat is thinking, and in TV you have to translate it to other version of to visualize it. So one of the things that got I wrote a different an Anat that it was the first female character that I wrote, and I was very anxious about it because my wife told me, you're not intelligent enough to write women. So I was very scared, and she told me, listen, write about me. So the Anat in my book is in my books are a visual of my wife, and so my wife's father is a businessman. He doesn't sit in jail for murder. So that obviously changed, but the cleverness and the wanting of the justice stayed.
Hani, I was really surprised to learn that so many of the actors who were playing African asylum seekers were asylum seekers themselves. You know, as a viewer, that, you know, was really fascinating, but I'm curious how that affected the dynamic on set.
It was incredible. I mean, I'm like thinking back and reminding myself of things, but there was that day that we were shooting the scene. I think it was also, they were shooting the first scene in the series where we're in the desert. And I was sitting there with Michael, who plays, wow, I'm forgetting the names.
He plays
don't give it away. Don't give it away.
Yes. Okay.
What is his name? What is his name in the series?
I forgot. It's
been a few years.
I'll tell you in a second. Okay.
Okay. So he'll look up the name. So Michael, we're sitting there in the desert and it was a hot day and there's nowhere to, like, they made a tent where we could get a little bit of shade. And, he was telling me stories about how they walked across the desert where everything looks the same. There's no... What? Almi. That's right. He plays Almi. An amazing, amazing person, and a phenomenal actor as well. He's also a musician. Anyway, he was telling me, while we're sitting there in the desert, explaining to me that this is how it was. And they would walk between 2 to 4 months, a group of them. They would meet somebody who would tell them walk in this direction for a day or two, and then they would get to a place where somebody would be with a flashlight at night and they would give him money, pay him, and then they would tell them where to go next. And this is how they would make their way. Those who would survive survived. He told me about how they would fill their water bottles with a little bit of oil so that they wouldn't feel the need to like chug down the water, so it would last them for a longer amount of time. We got to kind of hear these stories and feel like we're helping to tell their stories in a more authentic way, I think. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. And I think it's funny, both of you have alluded a little to the fact that this show was filmed in, I think, 2017 and maybe airing in 2018.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what was the situation then with the African refugees in Israel? And maybe you could talk a little bit about how it's changed and what the situation is now.
Do you want to start?
Yeah, well, it's, sure. When I wrote the book, it was on the brink of a national crisis. There was no fence between Israel and Egypt, and there were in a day hundreds or even more crossing the border, and there was a real big fear that Israel is going to be flooded with Africans, and in Israel everything is an hysteria. So, but then there was really, and the hysteria is always connected to, we are going to lose the Jewish state. So this was at the beginning, and when I started the investigation, I spoke with a lot of people from human rights organizations to policemen, to DAs, and to people that lived in the neighborhood, and everybody told me Israel should build a fence as quickly as possible. It was in a complete consensus. And then the fence was built, and the TV was aired when the situation was that there was a fence, but in a way the Africans were stuck in Israel, and Israel was stuck with the Africans. And then the dilemma was that what is going on? What is going to be the situation with them? And because they couldn't get out, and the question was, what Israel is going to do with these tens of thousands of people that are currently living in Tel Aviv. And this created, especially in the south, in the central city, in the central station of Tel Aviv, riots and clashes between the population living there and the African immigrants, and shortly afterwards, politicians got involved in it because they sensed that this is a spot they can be interviewed, and there was a lot of tension when the TV series was filmed and aired. It was a real, it was a feeling that the situation is going to explode any minute. Nowadays, it's a little bit different. I think that the African immigrants realized that they do not have a future in Israel. There are no more people crossing the borders. The age of the population here is aging, and they have not been assimilated into Israeli society. So nowadays, I think that most of them want to get out, and they get out as soon as possible. There are still clashes between the population that they live in, because this is an entirely different kind of population and with no assimilation at all. So the situation is still tense, but it's less tense than it used to be.
I mean, I think it's less tense because the government has changed. So they don't talk about it as much, I feel like.
Maybe it's
and, as we were saying, there are also young children who grew up there, who were born there, who know nothing else other than, Israel and Hebrew, but they have no legal status. So they have no social or economical help. They have no rights. They have no, nothing was done to help them assimilate.
And just to clarify, they're not Israeli citizens.
They're not Israeli citizens. They're not citizens of any country, really. They're lost in translation.
Yes.
Yeah.
And has Israel accepted any as asylum seekers, or are they still in this kind of legal limbo that so many?
Well, the solution in Israel regarding the Asylum City is a very Israeli solution. For example, when they decided, when they wanted to go to work, because they arrived illegally to Israel, the decision of the police, the decision was that of the Israeli parliament is to forbid them from working because they are illegal immigrants. And then there was a discussion in the Israeli Knesset, and the police came and said, well, what are you going to, if you are going to prevent them from working, you're going to create a bomb. So there was a petition filed to the Supreme Court, and asking the Supreme Court to intervene. So the solution, this is what I was getting at, the solution was a very Israeli solution. The parties came to a settlement saying that the working of the immigrants is illegal, but the police is not going to enforce this illegality. So they are working illegally, but there's no enforcement of the law.
I thought it was interesting in the series and in the book. There are all these machinations by the government to figure out ways to get these Africans to leave. and some of them sounded ludicrous, but I'm curious what was true and what was false. An arms deal with a, African dictator, is that based in reality? If you could talk, I was curious what's true and what's false.
I think there was a situation where they were where Israel was trying to kind of sell these people to different countries and making arms deals with these countries. It so happened that it was written into the series before that happened, and the writers and creators were saying, like, oh, we're going to write this in. It might be too much. We don't know. And then, the next day, all of a sudden, it's in the news that actually happened. So it was kind of.
This was incredible.
Was made before the actual thing happened. Yeah.
This was incredible. The reality was unbelievable, because when I wrote the book and I created Pharaoh, this mafia guy that decides to create a bank because Israel does not allow the immigrants to use bank account, and it happens in reality. And also the selling of weapons to other countries in order for them to accept the immigrants. All of that happened in reality.
Asylum seekers.
Asylum seekers, yes. So it was. I felt that we are chasing reality and trying to keep up with what is changing.
Right. I mean, in some cases, things that might have happened, might have been too hard to believe in a way. Truth is stranger than fiction.
Yeah.
I don't know if
the truth is the reality is unrealistic, or is uncredible, you can say.
I don't know if there still is that law that the asylum seekers, some of their paycheck is held in a bank, and then they only get it back when they leave.
Yeah.
Right, which is kind of incredible if you think about it.
Yeah, the idea is to the fear was that in creating bank accounts, you are going to allow dirty money or laundering or things like that to happen. So this was the attempt of the Israeli government to prevent it. It was it was an incredible situation. It still is, but it was an incredible situation. It landed on Israel without Israel preparing for it, and without knowing how to deal with it. So it was a very unique situation.
Well, they've had quite a lot of time to think about how to deal with it.
Yes, it's true, but we had to get over the shock, and after we got over the shock, it took Israelis a lot to time to figure out the solution.
I think maybe either in the first episode or the second episode, someone talks about how there are many people who are perhaps here illegally in Israel, Filipino workers who may have overstayed their visa, other types of migrants, but because Africans, I think they said, like, stick out because they're Black, they receive more negative attention. I'm curious, what role do you see kind of anti-Black racism playing in all this?
Well, for me, and Hani, I don't think in Israel there was never, it's not an American issue. It's not a black-white thing.
It's anything that is different than being Jewish thing. Mm-hmm. No.
Yes, yes. First of all, it's the thing about being Jew, and because all Jews have under the law the right to come to Israel and get immediate citizenship, and of course they were not they are not Jews, and not only they are not Jews, they are Muslims, most of them. But I think that the difference between Filipinos, for example, and the Eritreans is that okay, there are a lot of Filipinos and Polish and Russians in Israel that are not are illegal immigrants, but the state knows how to deal with them once it decides to deal with them. I mean, if you a Russian, for example, a Filipino can be deported within 24 hours from Israel, and Eritreans could not, because they could not be returned to their home country.
Genocide.
Yes. So this created the problem is that the feeling that they are stuck in Israel and we are stuck with them, and they are stuck with us, and there's no way of getting them out. So I think this was the main difference between these kinds of immigrants and other kinds of immigrants. But this is my interpretation. Maybe it was also mixture of other things.
I mean, I think there's definitely racism deep embedded inside of Israel. It's just comes from a very different place than in America. Mm-hmm. It's not a black, or we don't have the history that America has. But I think that Israel is, you know, any closed community it's very scary for them and hard for them to accept outsiders, you know. I'm not making excuses for it, but I think that's the reality. And I think the fact that they look so different, and the fact that they, you know, it definitely, you know, it brought those things out.
Hani, in a previous talk discussion, you had mentioned that I think people thought there might be a connection between the African refugees and the Ethiopian Jewish community in Israel, but you were saying that wasn't the case at all.
Well, Liad was saying that they wouldn't mix between them, that the Ethiopians mm-hmm. didn't want anything to do with them or didn't want to be affiliated with them in any way. To make it very clear that they're, you know, everyone wants to stay in their group and not be associated with the other group. On the other hand, you know, Ethiopian Jews were sometimes attacked or you know, people would go after them thinking that they were Eritrean or Sudanese because they were Black and they didn't know how to, you know, see the difference or find the difference.
So I see there's so many questions, and a lot of them I think are about the situation of African refugees in Israel. Before we get to those, which we will in a second, I just wanted to ask about Israeli TV. It seems to be definitely having a moment in the United States. I don't know if either of you know why, you know, shows like Fauda or Shtisel have found this mainstream audience.
I mean, I think that for the first time in the world, you know, the world is such a small place and we have so many streaming opportunities, and people are used to, you know, they're starting to be used to opening up and hearing different languages. And even though a lot of the times, unfortunately, people watch the dubbed version, which I don't think is possible in Flix, which I'm very happy about. But I think the world is becoming a smaller place, and so it's giving a platform for many more, you know, people to express themselves and get their stuff out there. And I also think that Israelis have the tendency to be like, you know, just like in the startup world and the high tech world of like, you know, coming up with ideas and being at the front, you know, front runners for all of these, like, you know, all of these ideas and initiatives and being very, wow, I'm losing my English, being very
creative.
Creative, that's the word I was looking for. Thank you, says the writer. Being very creative. So I think that, you know, now that that's coming together with having the platform to show it off, and people are, you know, just drinking it up as they should. Yeah, it's very exciting. I never thought it would be like I would see the day that it was cool to be Jewish, and now it like feels kind of cool.
What's nice about, I don't know, maybe nice is not the correct word when talking about Asylum City, but what's what really sparked my interest was that it's not about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and so much of what comes out in English about Israel just focuses on that.
Yeah.
Is that something you guys thought about when you were decided to work on the series, or kind of working on the book itself?
Well, as you mentioned before, my books were translated to numerous languages, and this usually came up. I mean, the fact that I deal with life in Israel, not Palestinians, not the Holocaust, struck people as very bizarre. And I think that one of the things that my books are doing, and the TV series that are not connected to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, is portraying Israel as a normal society with problems that are not necessarily connected to the Arab-Israeli conflict. And it usually surprises people. And I think that the way that the Israeli society deals with certain issues, civil issues, are very much like other Western countries. And when people read about these kind of things or watch them on TV, they feel a connection, because this, for example, this immigration issue is international. It's not an Israeli issue. Of course, in Israel, the hysteria is overwhelming, but this is not an Israeli and a unique phenomena to Israel. So,
by the way, it also has to do. I mean, that's why I say that it has to do with the politicians, because if you look at, if you look at Trump with the immigration issue here, or the asylum seekers here coming from Mexico, or over the border, there was, it can be very hyped up, or it can be, thought of logically and see what, obviously it's an issue that needs to be addressed. But there's a way to address it, and there's a way to see these people as humans, and there's a way to, and there's a way to make society scared and fearful and hateful, or a way not to. Sorry, just had to say that.
Last question. Will there be a second season?
I don't think so, because it was, the plot is a closed plot, and when you watch the TV series, I think that is one of the advantages of this series. You get all the information at the end. You understand completely what happened. There's no cliffhangers. There's no well, we'll see who did it in the next season. So I don't think so. There's always a chance, but because it was from the beginning a closed plot, there's no reason to deal with immigrants in another plot that derives from this plot. So.
But some of your books are also about Anat. Some of your further books do sort of follow her in the future.
Yes. I just published a new novel in Israel that Anat plays a role in, and now she's a mother. Now she's a mother, and she has to juggle between a life of a policeman and motherhood, which is. Motherhood is always very challenging, but being a policewoman, I think, it adds a lot to it. So yeah, she fascinates me, because every time she understands what is happening. She understands, she looks not only at the a crime, but not only on the specific crime incident, but also on what made the crime possible. So for me as a writer, gives me an opportunity to discuss larger things.
Someone in the questions wrote, the issues the series raised are so important. Shouldn't there be a season 2? So there's a bunch of people here who are calling out for a season 2. I'm going to turn to the questions. A few questions touch on children of African refugees. Questions about, do they have a path to citizenship? Can they serve in the army? And how do they communicate? Like, do they integrate with other Israeli kids?
I just want to say, like, tell a little personal story of mine, that my aunt, who used to be one of the head writers in Yediot Achronot, Yael Gvirtz, she started an organization called Elifelet years ago in, I think, 2012, 2013, which was to take care of the children of the asylum seekers, because they were children that were also left orphans, that, you know, didn't have anyone, and they were, you know, put into these nurseries where they didn't have anything that they needed, in horrible states, and had, I mean, anyway, so there were amazing people who came together in southern Tel Aviv to take care of this community of children. I think that now there's something like 8,000 children, refugees, still in Israel. I don't know. I don't think that they have a path to citizenship at the moment. Correct me if I'm wrong. I have no idea about the army. Yeah, that's all.
The legal situation in Israel is that it's different from in America. The fact that you were born in Israel does not grant you citizenship. It's either that your parents are Israelis or that you are Jewish, and so I think that the situation here now is that they are integrated into the Israeli educational system, but they are not citizens, and so they are not do not go to the army, and
they don't go to schools as the Israeli children do. They have their own school system. They have
some go to Israeli schools, but this is
very, very rarely integrated, I feel like.
Yeah, they do not have the rights of citizens in Israel. So anything that they get is you know, out of grace. It's not something that they are legally have the right to claim.
There are a lot of good people who are doing what they can to help them in the community, also in Levinsky, in that area, to try to get them to integrate more, to give them the opportunities, but they're not really given the opportunities from the government, that's for sure.
Some of these questions you guys may not know the answers to, because I know you're not, you know, experts in this issue, but a few people have asked, why do these refugees choose to go to Israel if they already know they're going to be facing, you know, discrimination there?
Well, this was one of the questions. This was one of the questions I asked them when I did the research on the book. Why Israel? So first of all, it was it's a practical answer. In order to arrive from Africa to Israel, you don't have to cross any sea, and you can go by foot. So this is what they did. They did not. Israel was something that they knew about. It was a Western country that they can arrive to, and they imagined that it is a wealthy country, but it wasn't something that ideological. It's not dreams of Zion, Jerusalem, and things like that. Totally practical.
I don't think they realized that they would be greeted the way they were greeted, or that would be their future.
And also, yeah, right. And also kind of what you were saying on a practical level, you know, in places like Egypt, you know, they weren't allowed to stay, at least in Israel, even if you were put in prison.
Another point was that when I did the research, as Israelis, we did not know what is happening in the Sinai desert. We did not know that there were, some of them were tortured and raped by Bedouins. So the statistics were that approximately 90% of the women that came to Israel were raped on the way. And this was in Egypt, in the Sinai desert, there was Egypt actually, there was an enormous torturing camp. And when I learned about it, this is one of the things I wrote about in the book, because and people were amazed that this is something that is occurring outside the borders of Israel. Not only women, I mean, a lot of men were raped and tortured, and a lot of people were taken money from, and it wasn't a fun journey.
Someone asked if either of you felt like you had to separate your own beliefs from doing the work on the show.
I felt if we had to separate our belief, like our personal beliefs.
I think so, right? Maybe your, you know,
from the show,
or moral convictions from when you were.
No, I felt very connected to Michal, the character that I almost played, and I felt very connected to Anat. I think that, I mean, I definitely stand on their side of things, of social justice and yeah, and fighting for what I believe in. And I think that, I mean, it speaks to itself that Liad wrote about this subject. I think that he wanted to bring it out and have people.
But you know, also in the book and in the TV series, and it started in the book, I did not want to preach. And the easiest thing to do is to preach and say, this is the right way, and this is the wrong way. And when the rights of the books were purchased to television, this is one of the things that I wanted to keep. And I think that the TV shows, shows and the realistically what is happening. Anat is determined to find the perpetrator, and but you do not see her for 1 minute preaching or saying this is right, this is wrong. And I think this is one of her strengths.
It definitely was written in a way that I think everyone could watch it and everyone could listen, which is, yeah, the best way to get something across. But I think that it definitely had, I mean, yeah, the heart was in a certain place, I would think.
I also think there was some nuance. You know, one of the characters, the woman who lived in South Tel Aviv, who I think was Mizrahi, and, you know, these refugees were coming into, you know, she felt like her neighborhood, and she was, you know, she felt like they were ruining the neighborhood.
Well, that's another thing that we were talking about before, was that, you know, the government brought these buses of these asylum seekers to the poorest neighborhoods in Tel Aviv with, you know, the people in society that don't have a voice, that don't have the chance to raise up and do something about it, that don't matter as much. I mean, southern Tel Aviv was always like, there was more, it was always kind of a different world, 5 minutes away from center Tel Aviv, with prostitution and with drugs and all of these kind of things. And so they dropped, these people off there because they knew that the people that lived there wouldn't be able to do anything about it, really. And so, yeah, they
And
imagine this, and this is a realistic story that I heard a lot of times. You have an apartment. This is your main asset in life, and you live there with your family. And suddenly, one day, across the hall, there's an apartment that is rented to 15 men. So what do you do? Really, it's when I started to speak with people from the South Tel Aviv, my heart went out for them. It was a really, really difficult time for them. The neighborhood changed immensely. In a few weeks, it was a different kind of neighborhood, and they didn't know how to deal with it.
And I think I remembered reading some articles about it, at the time. I think it was easy to, perhaps portray them as racist, or, they're completely out of touch. But, in the show, you managed to show, why they had these feelings and their own interests. And it was more just about trying to be heard and kind of survival.
I mean, I think that all of these things can coincide together. Yeah. It's like, it's not just right and wrong or black and white. There's a lot of gray areas, and there's many layers to us as humans. And, there's ways of going about things. I mean, everyone's right and everyone's wrong, right? It's like, yeah.
A few people have noted that, the show wasn't hopeful. I'm curious if you guys are hopeful about maybe the situation in Israel in general.
Well, well, this is true. I think that also in the books, in my books, and also in the TV show, you portray life as it is. And unfortunately, life is not only optimistic. And it doesn't end with a musical where immigrants and the population of Tel Aviv start dancing and singing together. But this is life. But you understand who committed the murder. So this is kind of relief. And it's an interesting solution. So
no. Don't want to give away too much.
No, yes.
So just so people know, they can watch the entire series on Chayflix. And I think Suzanne is going to send out an email with the link. We are out of time. Thank you. This was so interesting.
Thank you so much.
I think I learned so much. I'm sure, our audience learned so much too. I really appreciate it. I'm going to throw it back to Suzanne, who's going to tell us about some upcoming Zoominars.
Yes, again, thank you both for that fascinating conversation and for opening our eyes. I know so many people were very unfamiliar with what has gone on in Israel with the asylum seekers. So thank you. And as Sarah said, you can watch the full series on Chayflix. Chayflix is offering a 30% discount to anybody who wants to subscribe for the year, and you can watch the full series. I'll be sending out later today, you'll get it through Zoom, the links to watch the 3 free episodes, and you'll receive an email with it again later in the week, along with a link to the 2 books that are in English of Liad's. I also wanted to remind people to sign up at momentmag.com for next week's Zoominar. We're fortunate to have 2 next week, one with Tova Felshu and Dr. Ruth. And next Tuesday, we'll be doing a special program on shedding light on domestic violence. So again, thank you, Liad. Thank you, Hani. Thank you, Sarah. And
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach, happy Hanukkah. And thank you to the audience for showing up today, and we will see everybody next time.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.